I don't know if it was Milton Friedman of some Austrian economist that says socialism works until the money of the other people is still there. When they run out of the money of other people, it doesn't work. I hope New Yorkers, they don't have to experience that.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview.
Welcome. This is the Outstanding Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Harper. On this show, we talk about issues in the news, politics, culture, and spirituality from a biblical perspective. Today, we're talking about socialism and whether it will destroy the country, or at least New York City. And here to help, I have two really great guests. We have Jared Bridges, the editor-in-chief of The Washington Stand, and my boss. So let's hope this goes well, guys. And Yoey Suárez. Mr. Suárez is a writer, producer. He's a journalist. He was exiled from Cuba due to his investigative reporting about things like torture, taking political prisoners, cyber surveillance, the kind of things that we know about in Cuba. And he's also the author of a couple of books. One is Leviathan, Political Police and Socialist Terror, and El Soplo del Demonio. You can correct me on that pronunciation there. But Violence and Gangsterism in Havana. Thanks for both of you guys for coming on.
Glad to be back.
You're back. That's right. You've both been on.
Thank you.
That's right. So, Yoey, I want to start with you because you have a pretty incredible story. I mean, there's a lot of people in the news, in podcast space, talking about socialism, largely recently because of Zohran Mamdani repopularizing it, winning his mayoral bid in New York City. But for you, the question of socialism is very personal coming from Cuba. I want to just give you a few minutes to tell us your story before we dive into this discussion.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Casey. Yes, I was a journalist in Cuba during 8 years. I did journalism from a non-state media, for independent media. And because of that, I was persecuted. I suffered persecution with my family. I was arrested several times. I was once kidnapped in the middle of the street. The political police was very interested in me not reporting and tried to put pressure over me and my family for me to basically surrender and not do any critical reporting in the island. And all those themes that you mentioned, torture, political prisoners, persecution to religious groups, especially Christians in Cuba, those themes, they really hate when people put a magnifying glass over them, because it breaks the narrative, the monopoly of the narrative in the international arena. But thank God we escaped from Cuba, and we are here, my family and I, since 2022. We feel very blessed to be in this country.
Wow, so you've experienced this firsthand. I want to ask you kind of a follow-up to that. I mean, what is it like do you think that you were living in fear of the government? Because in the picture of socialism that's often painted is that basically the government becomes your best friend, your rich grandpa, who gives you his inheritance early and just takes care of all your problems and the money's flowing. But when you talk to people who actually lived in socialist countries, there's a sense of fear and oppression of the government. So from your experience there, was that your experience that there's a general fear of the government?
Well, in that sense, it's like living in 1984, the Orwellian world, because yes, you have to look for what comments do you make with people around you. You don't want to make a joke about the government or about Fidel Castro, all those patriarchal figures, in the sense that the government is trying to paint the state as God and Fidel Castro as the Messiah. And you can relate those stories with other historical process, let's say in China, in Russia, the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. And yes, you live in fear even to be successful. If you make a little more money than the government think, and the government think that you are being a little bit wealthy, you are going to experience a lot of problems. The government put inspectors over you. The government put target over you and your business. And there are a lot of problems for you to just create a business, for instance, and contract people to help you with the business. You have to be equal. All the society has to be equal, but equal in misery, equal in non being successful, and that's a big problem because we as human beings, we're not equal. God made us with different talents, with different heights, and the shape of our hair. I don't know, a lot of different things. And the thing is that socialism tries to put you in a box and say, no, you can't grow from here because we don't want inequality in society. But the problem is they're cutting your wings, they're cutting the freedom that God gives you. And in some cases, they are putting pressure over your own talents, the talents that God gives you to develop in society.
Okay, so it sounds like socialism doesn't create equality by raising everyone up, but by keeping them at a lower level, equally low. Jared, I want to bring you in here because it seems like these socialist countries, for one reason or another, history tells us they're not very friendly to the church.
No, they're not at all, because the church is competition in a sense. So whereas in a place like the United States, you read Tocqueville and others, you see how the church fuels the national economy, it fuels government, it fuels the national cohesion. And with socialism, though, the highest good is the state. And the people serve the state doesn't serve the people. And so anything that's in competition with the state is going to be seen as a threat. And that's why you had in these, especially in the most extreme examples of communism, like the Soviet Union, the CCP, China, Castro's Cuba, they're going to trend toward atheism because the church is a threat to the state.
So what about, you've probably heard this argument before, but there's a lot of arguments that have been made for socialism from the Bible. They say, well, the early church, they lived communally and shared what they had. Jesus obviously taught, to be kind to the poor and to be generous, and Paul carries that theme as well. It's also in the Old Testament in some ways to be kind to people. But what do you make of those arguments?
Well, and they're not the same thing. That's so what you see in Acts with the early church is that they were sharing. They were sharing their possessions. Mm-hmm. They were doing that out of a heart transformed by the gospel, sharing their possessions with one another voluntarily. And what you have with socialism is a coercive act of that. So there's not any room to share because all you have is the states, and you are the states. And so sharing is the ability to share is greatly diminished, and you are all your possessions are taken, and some of them, they're ostensibly shared, but they're actually just taken, and wealth is redistributed.
Right. And the government is famously really good at doing things with the money we give them. Right. We've seen that. Yoey, let me ask you, as someone who came to the U.S. to get away from socialism, how does it feel to see so many Americans, like in New York City and other places, celebrating the thing that you had to flee from?
Well, I can tell you, I live first in Miami. Miami is a very, heavily Cuban populated place of the U.S., let's say. And in Miami, it's very strange for you to see a Che Guevara T-shirt or something like that. I mean, Cubans know and in recent years, a lot of Venezuelans and Nicaraguans, they know how bad socialism is, and those icons of socialism like Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, what they did to the people in the third world in general, because Che Guevara tried to found a guerrilla in Bolivia, in El Congo, in other places. So when you have a place where there is a big population of people who knows how bad is socialism, you will and transmit that information, that experience to the new generations, you will have a city like Miami. I mean, it has problems, obviously, but at least not that problem with socialism, which is a big step. But in New York, it seems that New York is so disconnected from the reality, the historical reality of socialism, and especially people who voted for Mamdani are really young people who hasn't experienced, I don't know, the CCP or the Cold War, all the information, terrible information about the persecution of Christians, persecution of dissidents in that part of the world, that they are really disconnected from the historical perspective of what socialism means. And it's funny because Mamdani was trying to it was like treating a second grade class when he was out there doing speeches like we want, and the crowd responded, fastest buses. It's like a second grade class I mean, my kid is in second grade now, but you can understand that he really gets the constituency. The people who voted for him are really young people, inexperienced, and probably too online with a toxic culture, with the algorithm of TikTok that pronounce that kind of information in the digital sphere. And I think Cubans try to do, probably people from other nationalities too, but Cubans in New York were really worried about some Cubans about what does that means that you have a socialist administration now in the biggest financial center of basically the West. And they were trying to put a message during the campaigns of, hey, this is bad. But I think it doesn't resonate. It didn't resonate because first, socialism is really romanticized
Right.
its proposals. And second, Mamdani was basically, again, doing a second grade campaign, like free ice cream and no homework for anybody, for anyone. So that always works, right? That always works.
Yeah, and I think the point is how, I mean, and this is the real question, is how do people forget that it doesn't work?
Right.
I mean, we have a 70-year laboratory experiment in
and
the
a lot of dead
Soviet
bodies.
Union, and you have it's got a trail of dead bodies. It's got a trail of just bankruptcy and failing and not working, and yet here it emerges again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I feel there's a few critiques that we're kind of hitting on repeatedly. One is hostility towards the church in socialist countries. Another is that it just simply doesn't work. Right? I mean, for all the promises, if it actually worked, it might be something we could have a real debate about. Well, is it worthwhile to have the government run grocery stores or not? But maybe I should ask you, Yoey, of these government-run grocery stores, how do those turn out?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work it's not only that doesn't work in Cuba or Venezuela. For instance, Venezuela is a super rich country with oil reserves that can feed the world for at least a decade by itself. But it's now a really poor country with a big inflation, with no food, no medicines. And the same is in Cuba. Cuba's economy was competing in the 50s with Spain and Italy. And now Cuba's economy is probably competing with Haiti. And you have that because of the centralized power of the state controlling every aspect of life. and obviously crushing dissidents, the free market of ideas, as here in the U.S. Says. But the other thing is that socialism is good diagnosing. It could be good for socialist politicians, obviously, diagnosing the problems, because we know nothing is perfect, but diagnosing a problem, it doesn't make you the right guy to solve that problem, but it makes you feel good with you, because you are a virtuous person. You are able to acknowledge that there are problems, I don't know, for families that can't pay groceries or live paycheck by paycheck. But that's also something that the church has been doing for centuries, diagnosing those problems and taking care of the poor effectively, for instance. But of course, if you're a socialist and you are also surrounded by a culture that is more and more anti-Christian, you try to occupy that space that the church has been occupying for centuries, diagnosing the problem, and promising that you are going to take care of those poor, those people who are in need that we know exist too. But the thing is that for you as the state, to be able to take care of those people, you have to steal the money of other people. You don't produce anything. I mean, the state doesn't produce anything. So I suppose, I don't know if it was Milton Friedman of some Austrian economist that says socialism works until the money of the other people is still there. When they run out of the money of other people, it doesn't work. I hope New Yorkers, they don't have to experience that.
No, that's a fascinating way of putting it. You put it earlier that it replaces the church in the sense that it rightly diagnoses the problems. And I think that was Zoran's appeal, is people do feel, I mean, inflation has risen so much. I mean, rent is high all over the place, but of course New York is infamously high. It rightly diagnoses the problem, but then offers a worldly solution, I think, based on coveting, which is really like the gospel. It's preaching you're in sin, you have brokenness in your life, and the solution is turning to Christ. But in this model, Jared, it seems that the solution only doesn't address the root issue of the heart.
Right. You're still going to have problems of greed there. And, one of the big critiques of socialism against capitalism, for example, is that, capitalism produces greed. And so, you get like the 1980s movie Greed, or just not Wall Street, where greed is this virtue. And there's, but and they act as if in socialism greed doesn't exist or greed goes away, but it doesn't. I mean, it still has people in it. The economic system is populated with people, and now you've got people who are godless, right, by design, and so all those problems, underlying root problems of the human heart, are still there, and there are people still getting rich in socialism.
People who don't produce anything.
Right. It's just those who have enough power to take, and they do the taking, and so you're not replacing something of a higher order. You're replacing it with something that has more propensity to go wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of based on this lie that the problem with poverty can be solved just with money, and that's just not true. We know that's not true. I mean, if you've ever tried to help someone who was homeless or on the verge of homelessness just by giving them money and really walking with them, maybe in church or something, I think many people in church have tried this before, where you really try to take someone under your wing and you say, I'm going to help you, I'm going to pour into you. What do you need to get back on your feet? And it becomes evident pretty quickly that money is not even the top 5 of their problems. They have often no relationships. They have very poor social skills. They may have addictions. They don't even know where their birth certificate is. and so this idea that you can just take other people's money and give them some money and solve all these deep, like, mental, emotional, spiritual things, those things can only, in my view, be solved by discipleship, Christian community, the Holy Spirit, inner healing, a knowledge of Christ, deliverance. And then once you step into wholeness, then you can hold down a job. But so many people, I grew up, a lot of my family was very poor, and I grew up, especially like the first 10 years of my life, poor. And I knew a lot of poor people. And the problem was not that they needed like more money. There was so much, that is one problem, but it's a very small piece of the picture. And so it's kind of based on a false gospel that we can solve the brokenness of the world by taking from rich people and giving money to solve problems of poor people. I have something for you guys that I think you'll be excited to see. Probably not. I printed off for this podcast the Democratic Socialist of America party platform. Okay? And so I thought this would be very interesting for us to go through some of these. Some of them, and I'm curious to hear from you, Yoey, if these are familiar. Some of them are pretty generic and sound great. Support working families. What politician doesn't say support working families? Of course. Housing for all. So I'm going to throw a few of these out and get you guys to react. Housing for all, college for all, and Medicare for all. So healthcare, education up until 23, and it says for housing, it says universal rent control and the guaranteed right to counsel for all tenants, building, and then just building a lot of housing to the point where everyone can have cheap housing. Who wants to jump in and respond to one of those?
Well, in the case of housing, for instance, New York is probably one of the places that has more regulations for builders to build house. So the first thing that you have to do, that you would do if you really want to increase the housing available, the houses available for people to rent or buy, is probably destroy all that network of regulations. But it's antithetical. That's antithetical to socialism. Socialism looks to get more control over the economical activity. So it's a contradiction in terms. Obviously, if you have lived that, like in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in the former Soviet Union, you would know that. But as a promise, it is pretty good. Who is, like you said, Casey, who doesn't want to increase the amount of houses out there, right? That's good. The other thing is socialism is like, that's why I said is like talking, is like promising free candy to kids. It's they don't understand what that sugar would make to their body. But for instance, freezing the rent, it would disincentivize those who are renting to rent their house, because if you have a top of a lot of regulations around you as a landlord, and also you have a top that the government says you can't rent over this amount of money, it's not going to be profitable for you, and what you are going to have is a shortage of available possibilities, available houses to rent. So it will increase the problem. But that's a fascinating way for socialists to then demand more state intervention, because the problem has been growing now because of your policies.
Right.
It will grow, and then what people are gonna, that's the last resource that totalitarianism insert in the mind of people, is that you have a problem, you ask for more state, and when you ask for more state, the problem is worse, obviously. But then you are gonna ask for more state intervention, and I think that's what Mamdani hopes. He knows that he is not a magician; he is just someone selling smoke. And when the problem it gets bigger, he expects to grab more power because of the people will demand more state intervention.
That's a fascinating observation. That when socialism fails, you say, well, it's because we don't have enough socialism, Jared.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, and I think it was in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure it was Bruce Springsteen, who had a song called 57 Channels and Nothing On. And it was about, I think it was just like he's watching TV. There's so many channels, and he's flipping through all the channels, and there's nothing on. And I cut the cord on cable television a long time ago, but because you're paying for like, maybe 200 plus channels now, and like most of the stations, I just wanted to watch sports, and 98% of the stuff I never watched. So, but you had to pay for the whole package in order to get the little sliver that you wanted. And socialism's a little, this is kind of a crazy analogy, I know, but socialism's a little bit like that in that you have to pay for the whole package. Somebody has to pay for it. They can offer all these things, and they're all not going to apply to you. Right. All these quote, close quote, free things, and you will pay for it. And I challenge you, show me one socialist society where taxes on everybody do not go up. Right. Because they will, and you will be paying for free dog sitting for whatever they're going to offer, and so it starts to sound good, all this free stuff, but you will have to pay for it in the end. There's no way around it. Somebody has to pay, right? And it will be you in some respect.
Right. So that kind of brings up a fourth and very common critique of socialism. We've got the hostility to the church. We've got the fact that it just doesn't work. Government grocery stores sound great. When you show up, there's no food on the shelf, or it's moldy. Nobody cares because there's no business owner who is a competent person who's in charge of making sure the food's on the shelf. It's a bureaucrat who's not trained well and doesn't care. You've got the tendency towards tyranny, which Yoey spoke about, of surveillance, for whatever reason, as soon as you get these big government policies, you get a police state with it, and hyper surveillance and shutdown of freedoms. And then you get the fourth critique, which is financial. It's not solvent long term. Right. It's not solvent long term. I think that I think it's good we're talking about this, and people on the right have to be careful, because I'm glad you brought up the housing example. It chose the housing example, Yoey, because the answer to socialism cannot be to say it's not that big a problem, because there is a lot of pain around housing. The answer from the right has to be, how do we solve this problem? Or to put it another way, and housing is a great example. Who do you trust if you had to build 1,000 homes in America? Who do you think would do it faster? One entrepreneur, contractor who had experience and some capital, or an entire government agency? And I think your common sense and your experience will tell you that one businessman could build 1,000 homes faster than an entire government agency. And that has got to be the message here, is that hardworking entrepreneurs and business people actually solve a lot of problems for people faster, more efficiently than the government ever can. And we can look at so many examples of how, for example, where's the wall? The big, beautiful wall does not exist. For all the promising and the limitless funds, the government is not good at building things. It takes them forever. Biden passed that gigantic over $1 trillion infrastructure package. Like, have you noticed anything anywhere in the entire country? It's like, wow, any one specific part of the country, you're like, this part of the country is better now. I defy you to find me one person who says this government building project was so fast and so efficient that this town is just thriving now. The government is not good at building things. They're good at killing people. That's like actually their best thing. There's the military, good at killing people. They're good at a few other things. Building things is not one of them. So on this theme of it doesn't work, Yoey, I've got the Medicare. I would love to hear from your experience about the effect of, when it comes to that college. We have Medicare for all. They want a 32-hour work week, the Democratic Socialists of America, with the same pay and benefits, 32-hour work week. Hard push into the Green New Deal, all in on unions. And then let me pull up some of these other things. They're pretty anti-war, which is kind of not really an economic thing. Popular vote, universal suffrage, reducing the power of the Supreme Court. So there's kind of some other pet projects here. So I want to get you, to respond as a whole, not just housing, these other socialist policies. Did any of them work?
Well, I'm gonna start telling you about the amount of hours, the ridiculous amount of hours that they want to work in the week just to have to live as kings. But there is a very important, it's a very important book from a guy related to Karl Marx, who was a Cuban. He was married to one of Karl Marx's daughters. That was Elogio de la Vagancia. It was something like that. It was a book. Its thesis was talking about how good it was to not work. Can you imagine? So it is in the DNA of the socialist literature for centuries. This ridiculous proposal that you have to work just a little bit, and then the state has to take care of you as if you are, I don't know, a king or something. But the funny thing is that in Cuba, for instance, because of the inflation, the amount of money that people get every month, it's around the $15, $15 for a month, per month. Wow. Even if you are, I don't know, a nuclear engineer, you can be the guy in the most ranked position, the most specialized position, a neurosurgeon, that kind of stuff. You get just between $15 and $20 a month. Also about the health care, because there was this documentary. It was I think it was Michael Moore in the early some decades ago, that he mentions Cuba had the best healthcare system, and that's ridiculous. People in Cuba rather prefer to die in their houses than go to a state-run hospital to get a surgery or anything. I'm gonna put you a practical example. I'm gonna give you a practical example. When you have to do right now, if you need a surgery in Cuba, you have to buy the things that you are gonna use in that surgery, needles, all the to do the stitches, the gloves for the surgeons outside of Cuba. If you have family outside of Cuba, you call them and you tell them, I need these, because I'm gonna be in a surgery next week. And if they send you that, you can go and give all the stuff to the medical provider, and he will perform the surgery over you, because the system is collapsed. The system is just collapsed because inflation, because there are bureaucrats running the thing, not actual doctors, not actual people who are interested in providing health care. And I think you have some similar stuff in Canada and in Great Britain and in Spain, because they have socialized, what they call socialized healthcare system. In the public system, you will have long lines just waiting for you to be in surgery or in whatever you need, big operation that you need inside the healthcare system. So it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It creates a class of bureaucrats that is not connected with the actual service that you're trying to provide people. And those bureaucrats doesn't care, because, for instance, in Cuba, the bureaucratic class, the Castro family and all the elite families of generals and anything, they have a specific hospital that treats them and their parent and their related people. They don't go where as a regular Cuban go to get your health care.
Wow. So it's kind of what you said, Jared, earlier. You still have greed. You still have people who are the 1%. It's just the 1% goes from business people who create a lot of value and employ a lot of people to 1% of government officials and their family members who just happen to be powerful in the right
don't
positions.
produce any value and
Right,
just take.
only take value. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I wonder what, Mamdani made a lot of promises in his campaign to New York City residents, and I wonder how that plays out once he starts trying to implement some of these things. What's going to happen? Free bus service, for example. I can't imagine any world in where that goes swimmingly, where nobody has to pay for it. Like, what happens to something when nobody owns it or nobody pays for it?
Yeah.
It just goes downhill.
I mean, I've seen some people who say, well, this is great because we'll get to see socialism fail in a microcosm, and it'll be another lesson for the American people.
It's not great, though.
It's not good for the country or for the American people, but I think we might get to see a live laboratory example in the United States of this, this failing, especially the some of the housing policies and things. I mean, I can envision a world where you would make buses a lot cheaper, at least, and people you can patchwork it together. But I actually want to throw you a curveball, Jared, to sort of end our time here, and it's about artificial intelligence, because you've sort of become an artificial intelligence expert. You've written some really long pieces for the Washington Stand, and I feel like there is this feeling now that socialism may be possible now because AI is going to be doing all of our jobs for us, and we're going to have these Tesla robots in our homes, and AI is going to make everything possible. And then also, socialism may not have worked in Cuba or Venezuela, but we're the United States. We're a very wealthy country. So you combine those things together, we're going to have, be leaders in AI. You think there's anything to that? Is AI what socialism needs to work?
No, because AI doesn't have a heart, and it doesn't change the inherent problems of socialism that are in that the state is the highest good. We need to have, the family, in socialism, the state is higher than the family.
Right.
No amount of AI or robots doing your work for you so you can have a 32-hour work week is going to change that structure. And so that structure is inherently morally has moral decay built into it. So I don't think any kind of technological advancements are going to help with that problem.
Yeah, I think you're right. When we think about the 4 critiques we laid out, I'm not sure that AI solves any of them. Hostility to the church, it's not going to affect that. Yeah. It's not going to solve that problem. The financial problem, the government's still going to be printing money and going bankrupt, building these things creating the social programs ever increasingly. I don't think that the inevitability of the financial collapse of governments that spend too big will not be solved by AI robots. You could envision a world where maybe there is some general lifting of all the boats because you have AI sort of like taking out your trash for you, or like working in some fields or something, and so food's like marginally cheaper. But whatever benefits are there are probably offset by the final critique, which is the totalitarian tendency of socialism. So any benefit you get from having a robot take out your trash, that robot is probably spying on you from the government. Yeah. And so AI only amps up the tendency to socialist totalitarianism, I think, would probably be the final word on that. Yoey, I want to give you the final word, though. I'm glad you're on here. I thought you had so much good insight. And I want to give you just the opportunity to give a final warning, not just to New York City, but to the U.S. of we have the second grader who's running for class president who's saying everything's going to be free and we're going to have pizza on the lunch menu every day, and we're only going to go to school 4 days a week. And it all sounds good, but what is your warning to the U.S. as we're flirting once again with socialism?
I just want to follow up, Casey, on that line that you mentioned, that But we're not Cuba and Venezuela. We are the U.S. You know what? In the 60s, Cuban said the same. We said, we're not the USSR. We're not the Soviet Union. We're Cubans. And Cuba has a big economy, has good relations with all countries in the area. And in the 90s, Venezuelans said the same. But we're not Cubans, We're Venezuelans. We're full of oil. We have richness. We have gold and diamonds. We have an amazing economy. And I hope New Yorkers are not the next, doesn't experience the same. And they are not going to be just a chain, a link in that chain, in that long chain that saying we were not Cuban, we were not Venezuela, we are New Yorkers. Because you know what? It doesn't matter how good is your economy. If you give it to the wrong person and the wrong ideas, it will collapse.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you guys so much, Jared, Mr. Bridges, and Mr. Suárez. I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, send this around. We rely on you to get the word out about this podcast. And I think fighting socialism and speaking the truth about socialism is one of the more noble tasks and important things that we could be doing right now. So I appreciate you listening and sharing it. And thanks, Yoey and Jared. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview. This podcast is made in the USA by producer Casey Harper, production assistant Rachel Woods, technical producers David Salkeld and Yusuf Fletcher, and executive producer Jared Bridges. Help support us by texting the word outstanding to 67742 and read more at washingtonstand.com.